There we are. Our beautiful faces.
Let's see. Yeah, I'll share that.
Listen up and join us.
Yeah, there we go.
Hmm. I know we're waiting for people to catch up. Have you watched any of the pregame stuff yet before today?
The NBA scrimmage stuff.
Yeah, the scrimmages.
Oh, absolutely. I've watched every single game.
Good.
Dude, I'm obsessed. I swear I'm obsessed. That's all I've been doing. Like since baseball and basketball started back up. That's all I've been doing.
Man. All right. I see it's live here. We got about 5 people on joining. Oh, 6. Okay. I'm getting popular now.
I was thinking I was painting boards earlier. I probably got paint on my face. I can't really tell though.
Oh no, you're looking good, man. Looking good, man. Got the beard. Had to
Yeah,
shave mine the other day.
that's the quarantine beard. I shave that when I go back to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been told, my wife tells me I could lose like 5 years. I shaved just a mustache the other day. She said I aged like 40 years. So it didn't last very long.
I'm so you like it's such a I mean I never completely shave it off because it looks like I'm 5 years old. But like it's such a part of me now that I feel weird without it. So I mean I have to keep it.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Usually it only takes me like a week to grow a beard out.
Yeah,
So
me
yeah.
too.
So goodness. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started then. So, welcome everybody to Friends in the Corner podcast, stories and topics from around the state of Kentucky. I'm your host, Dan Polly, coming to you. And right now, Friends in the Corner podcast is on a little bit of a hiatus. We're going to be coming back to you guys on August 8th, the 2-year anniversary of the show, with some great content then. But we really just could not wait until that moment for to get some content out to you guys here because we're too excited. Sports are back, and we want to talk all about it here today. The NBA is getting started back again tomorrow, and I wanted to bring a special guest on here to talk with it. A show favorite, been on the show a couple times in the past here. Originally from Under the Blue Banners and the Z League podcast, but more importantly, NBA super fan, Andrew Williams. Welcome back to the show, Andrew. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. I'm especially good now that the NBA is back. Like I feel like the life that's regenerating inside of my body. Know that basketball is going to be played tomorrow, so I'm doing great, and I'm excited to be on your awesome podcast, man.
Man, it's great to have you back, man. I've enjoyed the episodes you came on last year. We've talked everything from NFL to NBA to pro wrestling. So love just having you on to shoot the crap with you, man, and talk especially about now that we finally got some sports back here. It's been too long, man. There's only
For
so
sure.
much. There's only so much Netflix and Parks and Rec I can watch, brother. Or Tiger King back in the day.
Yeah. Tiger King feels like it was like 2.5 years ago.
I
Like
know.
that in the time period that we're living in, it just feels like that was such a long time ago.
Yeah, last week was the longest year of my life. So it,
Yeah.
everything just comes to a halt, brother. So, but it has been a little over a year since we've had you on the show, man. So do you want to catch my listeners up with what's been going on for your life? It doesn't sound like you've been up to too much lately, right?
Yeah, except I've been up to everything. My wife and I had a baby last October, and that's our first child. She's a little girl, and that's just been the greatest thing ever in my life is having her. And being able, this quarantine and this pandemic is tough, and I understand there's been so many people that's had a difficult time with it, but for us, we've been blessed to be able to stay at home with our daughter and watch her grow up, every step of the way. That's been really cool for us. And besides that, man, like, we've been off work, but I've been cutting wood and doing about 20 different podcasts and trying to keep my hands in as much things as I can. So we've stayed busy, and it's been a tough time, but it's been a good time.
Yeah, man. Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on too, is because I know you have a passion for podcasts, and you've started 4 or 5 in the last year. But you got a new one getting ready to come up here. If I was wondering if you could tell my listeners a little bit about.
Yeah, what happened was I've been through so many transitions. This year's been so hectic with so many things going on. I've been kind of trying to figure out the right algorithm to make my podcast successful. And about a month ago, Daniel Orton, that formerly played in the NBA, played for the University of Kentucky, reached out to me and asked me about starting a podcast together. So me and him are starting a podcast. It's called the Full Court Press, and we actually did episode 1 today, and it's really cool because it's kind of twofold in the sense of we're talking about his story, his journey, to give you kind of behind the scenes look what it means, what it is to play at Kentucky, what it is to play in the NBA and to play overseas. But also we're just talking. We're talking basketball, we're talking pop culture and all different kinds of things. And I think if people will give it a chance, they'll really like it. And it's the Full Court Press, and our first episode should be up this weekend.
Awesome, man. Well, we're looking forward to that. Check out Full Court Press and follow Andrew on all of his social medias here. We'll get a chance for him to plug those here a little bit later on. But man, I got to tell you, it's been too long since we've gone without sports, man. I mean, it's been a while since we've had sports of any kind, since March, man. And I'll tell you, beyond the NBA, we just had so much back in March happen to us. The NCAA tournament got canceled. And I'll tell you, I've talked about it on my show. It felt like my heart got ripped out, man, for Kentucky and seeing what could happen with them. What about you, man? What's it been like for you?
It was so difficult because it kind of felt like that, and I'm talking specifically Kentucky here. It felt like that they were kind of at that moment where most Cal teams get, where they start to ramp it up and they're really getting geared towards the tournament. They had that game at Florida, which was the last game before the ACC tournament, the last game before the quarantine and everything, where they came back from like 22 points down, and that was without Ashton Hagans. And you were starting to think, okay, there's not really a great team this year. And if this Kentucky team can hit their stride at the right time, then they could win the national championship. Like, because it was wide open. And so you're starting to get you're starting to get excited. You're starting to get your hopes up. And then this all happened. The ACC tournament got canceled. The NCAA tournament got canceled. And I'm just like you, that ripped my soul out of my body, because March Madness is something that's like a staple of my year every single year. And not to have that was terrible. And then we had, like, all the other sports began to shut down. It was just a crazy time, man. But especially if you're a Kentucky fan, you know what March means, and you know how passionate you are about that month. And for the pandemic to begin on that month, it's tough.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you, I've had some people on here to come and talk about it. It felt like a lot of people really believe. I mean, I feel like there'll always just be an asterisk by this last season, man, what could have been for this Kentucky team. So I'm hoping, there will be a time when this team is remembered very fondly. And, maybe we could ever go down.
It's difficult because the one thing, the kind of the lasting impact that this team has is that you had the weird stuff go on with Ashton Hagans right before the break, and that feels like 10 years ago. But like you had Ashton Hagans who kind of was like, it was not in with the team and hadn't played and didn't travel to Florida. There were rumors about him, like, not being with the team anymore and stuff like that. And I don't want that to be the lasting impact of this season, because there were some really good players in this team. I don't think they were the best team, but I do think that they were there, that they were right there. And if the bracket laid out in the correct, the correct way, they could have made a run. So I hope that we do get to remember, just a great season that Emmanuel quickly had, just a great season that Nick Richards kind of bounced back
Yeah.
and had. Those two guys for me were
Yeah.
really the story. So I hope that's how we remember this year, and not, something with Ashton Hagans and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I mean, that was the NCAA tournament. I know how passionate you are. You've been on this show to, share your soul about Kentucky sports here. And I appreciate you for it, man. And that was on March 17th when they decided to cancel the tournament. But a few days before that, on March 11th, was when the NBA announced they were suspending their season. So what were your thoughts when you first heard that? Where were you when you heard about the suspension?
That's one of those days. Like they always say, there's days in your life that you'll never forget. Like I look back in my life and I'm like, I'll always remember the day I found out that my wife was pregnant. Like I always remember certain dates throughout history. I will never forget the day that the NBA shut down. It was crazy. I can tell you exactly the way it laid out. Like we were at my mother and father-in-law's house, and I was kind of keeping up with everything on Twitter, because I'm a big NBA Twitter guy. Like I'm constantly refreshing. And if you don't know anything about me, like I watch every game. Like I'm a LeBron fanatic, but I'm with the league. I'm always keeping up with the league. And the Thunder and the Jazz were getting ready to play a game in Oklahoma City. It was around 7 or 8 o'clock. And I remember refreshing my Twitter feed, and the first thing I seen was Tom Hanks tested positive for coronavirus. And I was like, oh no, not Tom Hanks. No way, and then like 5 minutes later, these tweets start pouring in that like there's been a Jazz player that tested positive for the coronavirus, was rushed off the court. The game has been canceled. And they found out it was Rudy Gobert, and he had tested positive for the coronavirus, and they canceled the game, and, they shut down the season then. And that just felt so surreal to me, because we had heard about the coronavirus, all the way back from maybe the end of January or the beginning of February, but it never really seemed like it was a big deal. It really didn't hit us, or we didn't understand it. But for me as a sports fan, when you see an NBA game get shut down, and I remember that the report was like, the people in the stands don't know what's going on. Like they're just standing there like, we don't know if they're playing or not. And like a health official runs onto the court and says, we can't play this game. That for me, along with Tom Hanks, was like a gut wrencher, because I was like, man, they took NBA away from me, and it got Tom Hanks, and I was just devastated.
That whole week, man, is going to be one of the most memorable experiences I've ever thought, because with sports shutting down all the time, or shutting down at that time, I was also at work. A lot of people who listen to my show know I work in the bourbon industry, and we went from like a full booked weekend of tours to zero, and we shut down pretty quickly. And it was around the same time they announced the NCAA tournament was canceled. And that's when I was like, this is not good. This is not going to be good. And then Keeneland canceled its season, and it was starting to get a little bit more realistic that it's going to be a very serious deal.
This is one of those times that, in 10 years, or maybe not even that long, there's going to be a 30 for 30 documentary on, like what happened during that week, because just the things that unfolded, and the sports industry just shutting down. And what's weird is that the NBA was really, it was really the first major, I'm not talking about sports company, I'm talking about major company that shut down. It led the way when the NBA shut down. Like that was the domino that knocked everything else over. Businesses began to shut down. Other sports leagues began to shut down. And that's when you seen the increased measures from the government. So it was interesting to see the NBA be the first domino in that trend of these companies are beginning to shut down.
It was crazy. And that's when I first thought, when I saw the NBA, I was kind of like, you can't be serious. And then even here in our own state, I remember the two things I remember was the NBA shut down. And then a college in our state of Kentucky. It was Berea. Said we're done with the school year. They just completely shut down. And I was like, it can't be that bad. But I mean, here we are now. It's almost August, and
I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher as well. So like us being out of class and not being in school for months, at the start of the year, it just, I don't even know, man. Like it doesn't even feel like real life to me. Like it just, it feels like, I don't know. It's just something completely weird.
Yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting year in a number of different ways, and it's impacted everybody. Everyone has been impacted in some way throughout this entire experience here. But finally, we seem to have some, at least a little bit of our normality back. I guess to say normality, things are a little. I guess you could say as close to normal as I can now with the NBA being back, going to get started. We're excited to talk about it here on the show. I've got Kentucky's finest in my glass to talk here. And we just want to invite everyone that's watching the show to join in. If you have any questions for me or Andrew about the season, about the NBA, feel free to post them on the Facebook Live feed. Andrew's probably going to do better at answering than I am, but that's why I brought him on here. And we just want to invite you guys in as we start to have this great discussion as we get the NBA season kick back going starting tomorrow here. So, Andrew, as we start going, as we were talking about, season shut down March 11th here, and we weren't even sure if the NBA season was going to continue or not. We saw the NCAA tournament just said, we're done. And I think the NCAA tournament was what kind of made me think, man, we're not going to see any more NBA, because there was talks like maybe we'll just do a Sweet 16, or maybe we'll just take a certain amount of teams. And then they found we're done. We're just calling it. It is what it is. And it kind of gave me no hope for what the NBA season was going to be until June 4th, when they finally announced that they were going to do the NBA bubble down in Disney World. So what are your thoughts as far as what's led up to this moment? What do you think of the bubble process as a whole?
Well, like you said, there were plenty of moments that it seemed like there was no hope that this season was going to be finished. I mean, and for me, that's a struggle, because I look back, like I told you to begin with, I'm a LeBron guy, so I'm following LeBron wherever he's going. And at that moment, right before this happened, the Lakers are hitting their peak. They beat the Bucks, they beat the Clippers. LeBron had outplayed Giannis, outplayed Kawhi Leonard, and you're really excited because you're thinking, all right, now we're coming down the home stretch. There's really 3 real contenders for the title. Then it shuts down, and it looks like multiple times that there's not going to be a season that gets finished. There's different groups that kind of pop up in the NBA, some that want to play, some that don't want to play. You had different phone calls with different, I know Kyrie Irving was a big proponent of not wanting to play, at one moment. But I'll tell you what changed that. And they were really skeptical about playing, but there was a phone call between the superstars, and that was LeBron and Kevin Durant and Giannis and Kawhi and Anthony Davis and those guys. And they had a phone call. And on that phone call, they basically said, we want to finish this season. They talked together and they decided, we want to finish this season. And I think a lot of that comes directly from LeBron James. I'm not saying that like he's king and commander or anything, but like it's with him being the most important player and the best player, it's getting towards the end of his career. He's 35, going to turn 36. He's year 17. This is one of his last opportunities to get a title and one of his best opportunities. And so when they had that conversation that, he said, I want to play, and those other guys followed along with him, they took that to the league. And that's when you began to see the league make these plans for the bubble. And it was kind of down between 3 places for them to have the bubble: Orlando, which they picked; Las Vegas, which they were worried about, the atmosphere surrounding Las Vegas. And do you know the other city they were thinking about?
It couldn't be worse than Las Vegas. I've been to Las Vegas. Dear God. What was
Louisville.
it? Louisville. What? Really?
Yes, that Louisville was in their final 3. to host the NBA bubble. And it was because there wasn't an NBA team there, that there's hotels right around the Yum Center. Everything was going to be centralized in that one location, and they wouldn't have to worry about, like fans of a certain team because there's no NBA team in Kentucky. So, I mean, what I heard was that Louisville was actually a finalist, but the NBA
Wow.
has a big deal with Disney, already, because they're on ESPN and ABC. So I know Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, he stepped in, and him and Adam Silver worked together, and they made a really good plan, and they unfolded it out. And it's been taken a long road to get here, but we're finally here.
That is so crazy. I had no idea that Louisville was a contender.
Yep.
Just think how, I mean, I'm enjoying what they've got down there in Orlando, but how crazy of that, how that would have been if they were, camped out just 90 miles east of where I'm at right now, or west of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been an opportunity for the state of Kentucky as well to show that we could have a pro team here, because I know that there's been a group in Kentucky that's tried to get a team in Louisville for a long time, and there's been murmurings that maybe if they had 3 teams, they might have one to Seattle, one to Mexico City, and maybe the third one would be Louisville. So it would have been a great opportunity for Louisville to show, hey, like we can do this, we can host this. It ended up falling through, but I do think that's a really interesting scenario.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I was listening to, I'm a big Pat McAfee show fan. I don't know if you listen to Pat. They were having that conversation on the show the other day, is what city that doesn't have pro teams would be a great fit for expansions in any of the big 4. And Louisville's always in that conversation as far as NFL, NBA, NHL, which I think is awesome. So maybe one day in our lifetime, because God knows.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, God knows there's nothing to cheer for in Cincinnati right now. So
yeah, listen, we're 1-4. That's the truth. Like it ain't looking good for the Reds. But I've been watching every game, man. I'm so excited that they're back, but it's been so frustrating, their bullpen.
It's the Reds, man.
But I do hope Louisville gets the chance to have a pro team, because I really feel like that fans in Kentucky would really gravitate toward a pro team and really do well at supporting it.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll get there one day here, but we're sticking here with the talk about the NBA. So they decided to go for Orlando. They've put this bubble together with the hotels. They've done some very serious testing for all the athletes coming in, even if a couple of players have even left the bubble, like Zion Williams, who we've talked about on the show before, and come back, and they're required to quarantine for a couple days as well. And then through the scrimmages, we've gotten to see this epic arena that they've built here as well. So what are your thoughts as far as the parameters that they're taking to keep the players safe, to keep this illness away from them, to keep the season alive? And what do you think of the arena that they're going to play in? I think it's pretty dope, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, honest to goodness, and I'm not trying to be like, to speak in hyperbole here, but like what they've done with that bubble has been brilliant. I mean, I'm being honest. It's been brilliant. And if you've watched any of the behind the scenes stuff, the NBA has shown how this is possible. Like, if you want to come back as a pro sports league, this is something that you should look into. I mean, I've watched all the behind the scenes video. Like, there's different players that have been YouTube and, their experience, and they get tested every day. If they leave the bubble, it's for it has to be for like a family emergency. When they come back into the bubble, they have to quarantine for a certain amount of days. And that's not just like quarantine in the sense of you get up, walk around, do what you're doing. You have to stay in your room.
It's lockdown. You're there. You're just in your room the entire time.
And that to me is brilliant. And they've had multiple rounds of tests. It came out again today, 0 positive out of the 370 some players that are there, 0 positive. For them to be able to do that, it is so impressive. Now, there's been a couple of, we had a situation last week where Lou Williams left the bubble to go to, a family friend's funeral, and took a stop at a strip club, and then posted a picture with Jack Harlow eating wings. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, this is $1 billion bubble, and you're about to bust it over some wings. And like, that was frustrating, but they brought him back in the bubble. He has to quarantine for 10 days. So I'm really hoping, and I think that it will. I think that the NBA is going to show us, this is what you have to do. These are the measures that you have to take to combat this virus. And they're already talking about next year starting up in a bubble. I mean, they're already having those discussions already. As far as the court goes, man, it's awesome. Like, it's so impressive. You can't really, I mean, it doesn't bother me that fans are not there. It looks cool. They've got different music and different stuff playing. The camera angles are really cool. They bring fans up on the video board. They have chants and stuff like that. I just think it's a massive success what they've done.
That video board is unbelievable in the background there. Just watching all the displays go by, and then they have the pop up of the fans and stuff like that. I mean, it's unbelievable how, I mean, they've made lemons into lemonade basically throughout this whole process. And I'm very impressed, really excited to watch some NBA basketball in here. I've always been kind of even flow when it comes to my NBA fandom. So for some years I'm not as high on it as others, but this year, now that we've gone this long deprived of sports, I'm really excited to rewatch this. One thing you did talk about, though, I did want to bring up, you talked about just how successful the bubble has been so far and how it's kind of created the blueprints to how to do this, how to make this work. And I mean, we're already seeing some of the success. So now look at how the NBA with their bubble has worked compared to the MLB. And we've seen the MLB's gotten started for a few weeks, and there's already COVID cases popping up. If you're paying attention to the news, the Miami baseball team, players don't want to go play Miami now because they've had so many outbreaks, because I don't want to say they're not taking precautions, but I mean, obviously not enough precautions if they're at this point.
You can't, at this point where we're at with this virus in America, you cannot at this point just allow players to travel across the country and go around different people and do all those types of things and not expect it to break out. You're seeing that with Miami right now, in the sense of there's 17 players on that team that tested positive for coronavirus, and they're not even playing. I mean, they're not even having games right now. And I think, honestly, it comes down to the commissioner. I think that if you look at each pro sports commissioner, you have Rob Manfred in Major League Baseball. You have Roger Goodell in football. You have Adam Silver in basketball. Out of those three guys, dude, Adam Silver is always on the forefront of positive thinking and thinking ahead and planning and doing the right things. And the reason that the NBA succeeds is because they have a commissioner that cares and is always forward thinking about the product. When you have Rob Manfred in baseball, I mean, he basically last year called the championship trophy just a big hunk of metal. So like, the MLB is probably going to be shut down in a couple of weeks. Like, I've enjoyed watching the Reds, although they have killed me up to this point because their bullpen is terrible. You can see my cat in the background there, but they're probably going to have to shut down, and that's what's going to happen.
It kind of gets me concerned, and there's still a lot of discussions around this, and I don't even though the NBA says success is bubble, I don't know how this is going to work out too. But we got football coming up, college and NFL, and it's going to be interesting to see with what's happening with baseball. If they say, we may not be comfortable with this, or if there is some miraculous way they can move into a bubble system. I don't think so, and I don't think they're going to have the time to do that. But
so let me ask you, Dan. I want to ask your opinion on this, because I love college football. Don't get me wrong. I love college basketball. Like, I love those two sports, but I view this much differently than other people. Do you think we should be playing college football and college basketball right now?
I don't. With everything going on, and my reality that I think I'm coming into here, not just when it comes to sports, but just in general, is I think we're getting to get ready. We're already seeing kind of the wave kind of take over, but I think nationally we're going to be going into another shutdown here soon. And as we start to see more and more cases around the country, I think it's not safe for there to be at least college football this year. College basketball, I don't know. There's if this, I don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence on whether or not that's still a good idea. My thought process is where I stand right now, play college football in the spring, maybe only in conference. And then NBA maybe not start till Christmas or New Year, or NBA, college basketball start till Christmas or New Year's. And even then, I don't even know if we're going to be on the other edge of this or not. But yeah, it's hard. Go ahead. I was just say that's it's even just hard to say because I'd like to say I've got a prediction of what it'd be, but every day is different right now.
I don't see how you can ask these kids in college that don't get paid to go and play while this is going on when the players, the basketball players who are making 30, $40 million a year only feel that it's safe to play inside of a bubble. So how can you ask college kids to go play? I know and I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to be negative here, but listen to what's going to happen. They're going to try to play probably, and there's going to be an outbreak, and it's probably going to get shut down. I mean, and what would have been the purpose of it? Like, if you're going to do this, if you're going to do college basketball, then let teams play, like let Kentucky and Louisville play a couple of exhibitions, bring all the conferences to one, like bring all the conference teams, like all the SEC teams, bring them to one location, play a tournament, then go play the NCAA tournament at one location. They can't travel around because people don't abide by the rules and do the right things. There's always going to be cases. I just don't see how college can play this year. I just don't.
I don't either. And you made a great point, is compared to the pros, even on the NFL level, if they decided to start this season, those guys are getting paid million, if not a couple 100,000 to suit up and go do that. These kids, they don't even see a dime. Some of these kids don't even see a dime, and we're asking them to do this, but it generates money. College football is a big money maker. And I mean, that's why there's a lot of maybe not ethical people that are enthusiastic about the idea of getting it going again. But I think it should be played in the spring, and I think as college basketball, at least Christmas, New Year's. And at that point, that would probably just give us Louisville and our SEC games, that will completely cut out the rest of that. But honestly, right now there are things bigger than sports, and like you said, these are kids we're talking about here, and
and I especially don't see, like, they're talking about high school sports right now. Like I especially don't see that. Like I don't know. I mean, I know that's not going to be a popular opinion with a lot of people. But I don't, when if you're thinking about the health and safety of the people that are playing and not just the entertainment value that they give us, I think you have to think about this differently.
I know I've read something recent that I think Kentucky high school football's come out and said they are going to try to play this season. This is talking in July. Anything can still happen here, as we've learned, but we'll have to see. I mean, it could get worse before it gets better, which is, I guess I'm leaning on the side of skepticism a little bit here.
Me too.
Yeah. But hey, we at least got basketball for right now, man. We got the bubble. We're excited to get things going here again, man. And I want to talk to you, since we've talked all about the pandemic, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we should expect now that things are getting going again, what type of play we should see from these teams. But before we do that, I have to take a minute to talk to our listeners here, to tell them about Friends in the Corner podcast Patreon. We hope that you guys who are listening here will consider supporting us on Patreon. Friends in the Corner podcast is supported by the listeners like you. And if you want to be a part of the movement, consider supporting our show on a monthly basis. Through Patreon, our listeners get access to exclusive perks, such as getting their own name read out on each and every episode of Friends in the Corner podcast. They'll get exclusive content made by yours truly, and they'll even be invited onto their own personal episode as well. Join the likes of Tyler Witt, Trevino Woods, Sydney Klinkenbeard, and Mama Polly herself to help support the show on a monthly basis. Help us grow and connect this podcast all over Kentucky at patreon.com/FITC podcast. That's patreon.com/FITC podcast. It might be in reverse. I don't know. But yeah, check it out. Support the show.
Absolutely. Check it out. It's a great podcast, and Dan's an awesome guy.
Andrew, Andrew's definitely one of the show favorites as well. Having a couple episodes, awesome, man. But let's get talking about this getting restarted here. Now we're getting the getting the season restarted. All these players have had time to rest. It looks like all of them have been able to heal up for the most part here. And I was a little concerned about AD the other night, but I think he's going to be okay. And now they're getting the season started. So as we get started and we start to see the teams come back and get going, who are some of the teams you're most excited to see?
Well, obviously, I'll start off the top by talking about the Lakers. This gives me the perfect opportunity to talk about them. I think that what you're seeing from the 3 scrimmages that we've watched so far with the Lakers is that you've noticed that LeBron James has kept in shape. Like, this is not some guy that has went home and got out of basketball shape. He, out of all the players that has played, he's looked the best. I mean, he's looked the freshest. He looks fast. I mean, he looks like he is ready to dominate. I think the Lakers have added a couple pieces. They lost Avery Bradley, who decided not to go in the bubble. They lost Rondo until the second round of the playoffs, which, it may hurt them. I'm not sure, but they picked up J.R. Smith. They picked up Dion Waiters, 2 guys that can score the ball and will actually help them. They're going to give more minutes to Alex Caruso, who's a great defensive guard and can spread the ball around. And you have Anthony Davis, who by my calculations is a top 5 NBA player as well. They're a team that I'm really excited about. Obviously, you got the Bucks that are a championship contender. They're right there. Giannis is probably going to win the MVP this year.
Yeah.
He's been excellent, and he's been excellent from the restart. My concern with them is that they don't have the guys to win a championship. They remind me a lot. If you go back to that 2010, 2009, 2010 Cavaliers team that LeBron had, and he was so great, but his team wasn't good enough to win a championship. And I worry about that. I'm not saying they can't, but I worry about them as the playoffs go along. And then that's the top seed in each conference. And then you got some sleeper teams out there that I honestly think can make some noise. I think the Raptors are really, really good. They lost Kawhi Leonard in free agency, but they've just kind of picked up where they left off with him. And they're actually, I picked them to play in the finals against the Lakers. I think they're going to beat the Bucks. Pascal Siakam.
Really?
Yeah, Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry. That's a deep team. They're a young team, and they've got a championship pedigree. They know how to win. On the Western Conference side, you have the Clippers. I'm a little bit skeptical of the Clippers because they've not had their full team together all year. And I think it's kind of hard to kind of put that together now. And, maybe they will go far. They've got the pieces, but I just worry about their cohesiveness. But you have some teams, man, like the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're a sneaky team in the Western Conference, 6-7 seed. That Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that played for Kentucky, he's great. Chris Paul's the veteran on that team. They could make some noise. You got the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. They're going to be the 7 seed, and they're going to be really, really good. And I'm going to tell you the one team that I'm watching out for that's not even in the playoff picture yet, but they've got everybody healthy and they've looked good so far, the Portland Trailblazers. You got Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, 2 of the best guards in the league. You have Yusef Nurkic coming back from an injury. You have John Collins coming back. They've got Carmelo Anthony. They've got some bench guys. That's a team that if you're the Lakers or the Clippers, you don't want to see in the playoffs. So I think, my tiers would probably be, my top tier would be the Lakers and let's say, I don't know. I kind of think the Lakers are my number 1 team. They're at a tier by themselves. But in that second tier, I got the Bucks, the Clippers, and the Raptors. And then right below that, there's a lot of teams that can make some noise in the playoffs.
It's kind of interesting you bring up the Trailblazers as a sleeper here, because I think near this middle part of the Western Conference, that's where I'm most interested in, because there's a lot of teams that are just really, I guess you could call them play-in teams, but they're only a handful of wins from really jumping each other. And you could see a lot of rotation in that bottom part there.
You've got the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, and the Trailblazers that are all right there. And the Pelicans are getting Zion back. The Grizzlies have Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. They're a good team. And then, like I said, you got the Blazers. That play in for that 8 seed in the Western Conference. It's going to be really good.
and it's going to get gritty here soon. I think it's Friday. We've got Grizzlies versus Trailblazers as one of the opening games there. So that's going to be really fun to watch too. A lot of things I've been reading has kind of said too. It looked, yeah, you've thrown a few more names out there, but they said it's kind of they're looking at the finals as being between three teams: Milwaukee for the East, and either the Clippers or the Lakers as well. So there is definitely a lot of talent here. But I gotta say, it is kind of weird to watch this season without Golden State being in the picture at all. I mean, they've had injuries, and obviously this was not a great season for them at all. But for the last couple of years, they've been a powerhouse. They've been one of, like, considered the Alabama of the NBA for the most part, and they're not even in this tournament. So how weird is it to not have Golden State at all in the bubble?
Well, like they were honestly, they were a dynasty, and
Yeah.
you know, we've had a couple of dynasties in the NBA. You know, going back, you had Lakers, Celtics, 80s, late 80s, the Pistons, the 90s were the Bulls, mid 90s the Rockets, early 2000s were the Lakers, the Spurs dominated for a while, and then you had the Warriors, and for the past, there was Warriors Raptors last year, but from every year from 2019 to 2015, besides last year, it was Warriors Cavaliers in the finals, you know, and it was LeBron versus the Warriors. It's so weird because you're so used to Golden State being dominant, especially when they got Kevin Durant. Like, I remember the day they got Kevin Durant, and I thought there's nobody that can beat that team because they're already so good. I'm telling you, last year they win the title again if Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson's not hurt. Like, Kawhi Leonard had a great postseason, but the Raptors ain't beating the Warriors if the Warriors are full health. And now you're looking, and the Warriors are not even in the bubble. It seems so weird, but I'm going to tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
You watch out for the Warriors because they've got the pieces. They'll be right back next year. And here's why. That Steph Curry and Klay Thompson were out this year with the injuries. They'll both be back fully healthy. Draymond Green's coming back. The Warriors are going to have a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. That's crazy, but they are going to have a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. They have Andrew Wiggins, who's a young guy that's kind of not reached his potential, but still has a lot of potential. And there's a lot of talk that if Giannis were to leave the Bucks in 2021, one of the places that he is, you know, could possibly end up would be Golden State. That would be terrible for me because I hate Golden State, but like they're going to be right back next year, and I'm kind of thankful that we're not seeing them this year because I was sick of them dominating. But I mean, they're going to be right back next year.
It's kind of like watching Alabama every year. There's only so much you can watch Alabama win, but
I'm so sick of watching Steph Curry hit threes.
Trouble. Or watching the Patriots win, which we might not see for a while now. But
yes.
Checking into our feed here just to see what you, the listeners, are sending us here. We've got Caleb Bailey on the feed here. He says, "Go Sixers." I don't even know where the Sixers are at here. They're the seed. They've clinched. What do you think of them?
They are, I will tell you about the Sixers, and the Sixers have a load of talent. They are super talented, and they're one of 4 teams that I think could possibly come out of the East: Bucks, Raptors, Celtics, Sixers. Those are the 4 teams that I could see possibly coming out of the East. The Sixers, man, they have some problems getting everybody on the same page. They have 2 superstars, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Yeah. Joel Embiid, you never really can tell what his mindset is. You never really can tell if he's taking it serious. That's one of the struggles that they're having with him. And Ben Simmons, honestly, I think Ben Simmons is the best player on that team. But Ben Simmons, you know, he's been playing point guard for the majority of the year. They're talking about moving him to the 4, to the power forward. If they do that, I think it could be good for them. What they're going to have to overcome, though, is their own coaching, because I don't think Brett Brown's a very good coach. But if they've got Tobias Harris, they've got Josh Richardson, they've got some good guys. I mean, if they could get hot, get some matchups, they could. I mean, they were almost their Kawhi Leonard crazy shot last year from going to the finals. So I mean, they've got the talent. I just wonder if they're able to come together as a cohesive unit, because in the playoffs, you got to be together as a unit.
The Sixers have always felt like that team, like they're just a few loose screws from like being a dominant force. I mean, they've drafted all this young talent you were just talking about with Simmons, and Embiid. And for a while, they just got all these big guys that are out there. It's like, this should be a team that should dominate the worst conference of
Yeah.
of the NBA. But they always, like you said, always seem a few things. You mentioned it might be the coaching. Um, and this was not something we prepared for, but I'd like to get your advice on something, because here's something maybe why I'm not completely all in on the NBA yet that maybe you can help me with here. But I personally think the most worthless position in sports is NBA head coach. It just feels like they're always getting hired and fired. You're rotating through the same teams. If you look at a coach's resume, they've been a head coach of 5 or 6 teams. Even if you have a situation like Toronto where you have the NBA coach of the year, they fire him at the end. It feels like this is talent is king in this league. So do you feel the same way, or what's the significance of an NBA coach?
I think it's two separate things that have kind of been mashed together. And I think there's a stigma around the NBA that coaching don't matter.
Yeah.
And now for your first point, I'll 100% go with you. I do think there is a revolving door in NBA teams, for coaches going in and out of certain teams. We've seen it with almost every team, just kind of a revolving door of coaches. Some coaches get a year or two and then they're gone. I mean, you had David Blatt, who got a year and a half in Cleveland, and they fired him and got somebody else. And so there is a quick trigger on NBA coaches, but I do think that there are some really top level coaches that do make a big difference. And I'll tell you who I think those guys are. Nick Nurse at Toronto. And here's what I can tell you about coaching. The Raptors don't have a superstar. They have a star. They don't have a superstar. Normally, this is a star-driven league. You have to have a star to win a title. You got to. Nick Nurse has taken the Raptors, who are just kind of just a tough, greedy group, and they've got a chance to come out of the East this year. He's a great coach. Brad Stevens with the Celtics, he's a great coach. Eric Spoelstra with the Heat, he's a great coach. Carlisle with the Mavericks, he's a great coach. Popovich with the Spurs, he's a great coach. I think that there are now don't get me wrong, there are some teams that are miserable organizations, and so there's like the Knicks. There's a constant revolving door of coaches, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that's what got me onto this whole tangent, because I was seeing the other day that they're potentially going to offer Tom Thibodeau a 5-year contract. And I'm like, that, Jesus Christ, man. It's just like, he won't even be there for 5 months, maybe. So
yeah, he signed. And I think
they did sign him?
Yeah, he signed. So what I think is, when you watch the games, and I think you'll know which teams really, really rely on their coaching and have really good, competent coaches, because they run real stuff. They make good substitutions. They have good game management. And now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not a star-driven league. On the Lakers, I know that LeBron plays a big, part in what goes on in that team, but I also know that LeBron and Anthony Davis have a good relationship with Frank Vogel, and they listen to him, and he's, he does that. So I think there's a stigma that the NBA coaches don't matter, but I think once you dig into the game, you'll realize there's some coaches that don't, some teams that don't, but there's some really good coaches in the NBA, and those coaches do matter.
And us being down here in Kentucky, I mean, we always hear about this because people are trying to steal our coach. Everyone wants to see Cal go back, but Cal had a hard time as an NBA coach. And I think that probably jaded him to say, I'm good down here. I have all the power control. I've got a lifetime contract now, so I don't need to go anywhere. So,
and college and NBA coaching is so different. In college coaching, these guys aren't getting paid. The star in college is really the coach. There may come a star every couple years, like Zion was a star, John Wall was a star, Anthony Davis was a star. There may come stars, but when you think of teams, you think of coaches. You think of Duke, you think of Coach K, Kansas, Bill Self, Kentucky, John Calipari. In the NBA, you don't think of coaches. You think of the stars first. So I think one of the reasons that Cal struggled, he's so used to being a dominant force around a team. When you're an NBA coach, you may not have that dominant power and control. You have to take a step back. These dudes are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and at the end of the day, they're going to do what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I remember that documentary. I think it was a 30 for 30 had a few years ago where they were showing him in the NBA, and he was telling players, dive for the ball, dive for the ball. It's like, I make this amount of money a year. I'm not diving for anything. And I don't blame him. I'm like, but, if you say that to, Andrew Wiggins, dive after the ball, they say, yes, sir. Thank you. May have another. So
yeah,
until they make their
absolutely.
money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Checking in on the live feed here. Checking in, Caleb Bailey has responded back to us. Got to remember, Sixers were one shot from making the Eastern Finals. If it wasn't for Leonard's shot, that killed my soul, which you kind of mentioned. And Chris Brown, Andrew, who do you think the Warriors will take? Who do you think the Warriors take that top three pick? So I think we're transitioning to the NBA draft here now. That's in October.
Yeah, you've kind of got, there's a couple of guys there at the top, from what I've heard and from the things that I've read on Twitter and various places. I think the Warriors are probably locked into one of two guys, either James Wiseman from Memphis or Anthony Edwards from Georgia. I think those are the two guys that James Wiseman, a big athletic big, is a great rim protector. They think maybe he has a game kind of like Chris Bosh that he could develop because he's kind of in that same mold. Little thin right now. We didn't get to see much at Memphis because he had, the agent money stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards is a really capable guard, can score the ball from all three levels, is a great player. And I think the only thing I'm a little bit hesitant about him because the Warriors already have guards. So like it would kind of surprise me if they took Anthony Edwards. Maybe I would lean more towards them taking Wiseman. But I tell you what to really watch out for. Watch out for the Warriors trying to trade that pick. And if they get the number one pick, watch out for the Warriors trying to ship out. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see them ship out the one Klay Thompson and something else to try to get Giannis. So I'm like, maybe they keep it and maybe they take Wiseman or Edwards, but I also wouldn't be super surprised for them to go and try to trade that pick to get Giannis.
And that's actually something I wanted to ask you a little bit more. I know we've been kind of dancing around between the NBA with the bubble and talking UK and stuff like that. And since I have you on here talking about everything with the NBA, you mind if we go over a couple of these NBA players and what do you expect their draft stock to be coming up here?
Absolutely, man. We can talk whatever. You know that.
Yeah, man. So let's talk, man. As we start to see now the NBA draft has been pushed here to October. And we look at some of these guys in the draft. I consider the Calipari 6 that are coming out here. I put Khalil Whitney as one of those options. He did play for us. But when you look at him, Wiggins, or when you look at all these players, excuse me, so professional. Let me go through my notes here. But yeah, Maxey and Quickly and Higgins and Richards and all that stuff. What's your kind of thought process as far as all these guys are in the draft?
Honestly, I don't see any of them being really impactful in the NBA. I think the guy with the best opportunity is probably Tyrese Maxey. He's probably going to go. There's some models of the mock draft now that have him falling out of the lottery. The top 14 picks. And, I think he's a hard worker. He's kind of a streaky shooter, can get to the hole, pretty well, can play pretty good defense. The problem with Maxey is I don't really know what his position is. He's probably a little short to play the 2 guard, but he doesn't handle the ball well enough to play point. I wonder about him. He reminds me of a less version of Jamal Murray, like not as good a shooter, kind of a tweener in between guard. I could see him going top 14. And maybe he's a solid role player, a bench player for many years. Maybe he can stick around. He's probably the best one coming out. Besides that, you have Quickly, Higgins, Richards, Montgomery, and Whitney.
Yeah. I wish, Montgomery, he's one of those guys, and, I need to really look back at the talent we got coming this year if they're even going to play, but he's a guy I wish stayed another year. I think he probably could have grown into himself this upcoming year, but,
Well, he had, I don't know if you've seen it, but it came out the other day. They expanded the NBA draft combine this year. They normally only bring like 60 guys in. This year, they're bringing 105 guys in to the NBA draft combine at some point. And guess what? Out of 105 guys, EJ Montgomery didn't even get invited. He wasn't one of the top 105 players in the country. And so I think EJ made a mistake. Like, I don't know what EJ plans on doing. He's not going to play in the NBA. Like, I would be shocked if he finds a landing spot. Like, I just feel like he's
Yeah,
probably an overseas player. Now on the other hand, I think Kentucky is better because of it, because I mean, we ended up getting a big guy, a transfer from Wake Forest, Olivier Sarr, that's probably a better player than EJ Montgomery, that we wouldn't have gotten if EJ would have still been here. But I think as far as him as a person, I think he made a mistake. And I worry about him because we've seen a lot better players than him not be able to make the NBA.
absolutely. And we'll have to see what happens with EJ and all these other guys. But yeah, this I would say too. Wow, we were all very high and hopeful for this Kentucky season as a whole. This draft stock, this draft class does seem a little more stagnant than what we're used to with a Cal draft league. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The rest of the guys, I mean, like Hagens is known for his defense. He's not really an offensive player. He's probably a late second round guy. Like, he's not very tall. Emmanuel Quickly is a great shooter. Now, Emmanuel Quickly, there's two guys that have a chance, like a puncher's chance at hanging around. Emmanuel Quickly is a great shooter. He's undersized for a two guard, but if he can just be a 3-point shooter, like a 3-and-D guy, play defense, shoot threes, he could stick around. Like, he could be a 7th, 8th man that could just come in an important moment and hit a three. I don't think he's going to be an NBA starter, but if he found the right role on the right team, he could do it. And the one that we're really kind of waiting to see about is Nick Richards. I do think, I will tell you this, I do think Nick Richards has potential. He can shoot the ball. He's learned to be a little bit more physical. He's got a little bit more confidence under him. The way that the NBA plays now, it kind of matches up perfectly for his game, because Nick's not a big banger down in the paint. He's more of a finesse touch guy. He's a little bit stronger version of Scal that we had a couple of years ago. And Scal is hung around in the NBA. So I do have hopes that Nick Richards could get drafted in the second round, find a team, play. But I don't think any of these guys are going to be like impact guys in the way that we've seen in the past with Kentucky players.
Well, hopefully we'll see here in October where some of these guys wind up, if they do wind up here on a team. And we're excited to get the NBA season started here, starting tomorrow with this bubble league, and see how it's going. And Andrew, I know we've talked a lot here about everything that's gone up to this point to get the NBA season started again. And I want to ask you, we've talked a little bit about what this impact might be on other sports, but what type of impact do you feel like this season ending will have on the future of the NBA, college basketball, or sports in general, if we do finally get to the end of it?
Well, the first thing I think the impact is like the NBA is going to show the rest of sports, this is the model that you have to take at this moment. Like, I think we've talked about that extensively, that this is the model that you are going to have to take. As far as next season goes, I do think the NBA is probably likely to start in a bubble next year as well. I think that begins hurting these teams, though, because they need that revenue coming from the fans being in the arena. So they're going to have to figure out a way to generate revenue. But for the future of sports, man, and for what this does, I think here's what it's going to come down to. I think the NBA is going to do what they do, and it's going to be successful. I do think it's going to be successful. I think they're going to finish the year off and crown a champion. I think other sports leagues are going to try to do it their way, like Major League Baseball and football and college. They're all going to try to do it their way. And we're going to see which one works. And I tend to believe that the only way that you can do sports right now is kind of the model that the NBA is doing. But I know that there are people out there that believe that you can do it in different ways. I think the MLB is showing us early on that it's going to be a little bit more difficult than just, playing regular without fans. But we're kind of going to have to see. And I just don't expect sports to be normal at least till 2022. That's kind of the year that I expect maybe we start to have, stadiums with fans in them again. And that gives us a chance to maybe get a vaccine and take some preventative measures. But honestly, I think we're not going to see it this year. They're going to try it. It's going to fail. I don't think it's happening next year. And I think that you shoot for 2022.
Yeah, I think in other sports too, and I'm kind of on NFL mind a lot lately too. And I got to think like a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, who just spent millions of dollars building the stadium, and now they can't even fill it this year. It's like, it's his life.
Yeah, I mean the Miami Heat's owner, he's lost like $2 billion since this pandemic started, or something like that, because he had ties to the cruise industry, and
Oh,
now the Miami Heat said today we're having fans next season, like, because they got to have that revenue. But I don't see it happening, and there's going to be a lot of these teams. What you're going to see is a really interesting thing. The salary cap's going to have to come down in a lot of these sports because they're not generating that same revenue right now in the NBA. Players are making more than they ever have in history of basketball. But now with the things that are going on, you're going to see the salary cap come down in a couple of different, of those sports. And it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the teams.
right. Absolutely. Well, a unique time that we are in, man. We are going to be watching the sports as best we can. From afar. Hopefully we'll be filling the stadiums of all of our favorite sports teams here soon. Until then, they're just going to be putting up cardboard cutouts of all the fans.
I'm currently trying to. I want to get my wife and my daughter's cardboard cutout in Great American Ballpark. So if you're listening to this episode and you have a connection, like, please get in touch with me. I want us to be sitting in the stands.
I was gonna say I saw on the Reds Facebook page today that you can pay to get your cardboard cutout in the stand there.
That's what I'm wanting to do. So if I can't take my daughter to a game, I wanted a cardboard cutout of her to be there.
I'll do that for a wrestling event. I want a cardboard cutout of me at Monday Night Raw. Just
absolutely, man. Like that, and that's another thing that's been weird is wrestling, man. That's another sport that's been affected by this has been wrestling.
Yeah, talk about a transition here. But have you been watching any wrestling lately? Have you seen some of the different things they're doing?
Yeah, I've been keeping up with it a little bit. I'll tell you like how I feel. I think that they have been creative in what they've tried to do. I liked, I'm watching WrestleMania. I thought the Undertaker's match with AJ Styles, the Boneyard, great, whatever that was. Oh. That was kind of neat. That was cool. They put that into production. I think that they've done different things to be creative, but it's really, really weird without fans because you expect, the big pop when the music hits, and you expect, that this is awesome or whatever when those chants start happening, and you're not getting that right now. So it's been a little bit harder for me to stay engaged with wrestling because I never realized how much of the fan experience like mattered to me as a wrestling fan. Again, and that does matter to me. I'll tell you one thing I've been disappointed with though is I've tried AEW, and I know the last time we talked, like AEW was just starting up. I've tried AEW, not a fan.
Really?
Yeah.
Not getting into it?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Like I expected, and I think I'd done some New Japan stuff, and Kenny Omega was such like this kind of enigma. Like he was in Japan, and he was supposed to be like the greatest wrestler in the world and all this stuff. And honestly, I feel like I was really excited for him. I was like, all right, he's coming to America, and this is going to be such a big deal, and he's going to be the guy. And I feel like they've used him really weirdly. I think, you see sometimes that Cody Rhodes is pushing himself a lot. Yeah. I think that happens. But I don't know. Like, I'm not in love with it. It's all right. But I mean, I think it's also struggling because there's not fans there.
That's how I'm kind of feel about AEW. I enjoy it. I watch it every week too. But I also watch NXT and all those others. And you get online, you see people like, well, AEW is the best. And it's like, it's a little more close than you all think it is. And the things I've come to learn is I think wrestling is the most objective thing you could watch. Like, watch what you like and enjoy it, because there's a number of different variety of programming you can watch. Like we talked about New Japan, AEW, if WWE, I don't like everything WWE does, but I don't think anyone does. But right. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. AEW has had hit or miss moments a lot of the time. I've still been enjoying it, but it's interesting to see.
I think NXT has been great. Like I'm probably more. I mean, I think wrestling's one of those things that's like, polarized. Like it's hyper polarized. You're supposed to love one thing and hate the other, and like there's no intermixing of like you can like all this stuff at different times. Like you don't have to love AEW and hate NXT, or like you can. Every one of these companies are going to do stuff that you like and stuff that you hate. So like just enjoy all of it.
I'll tell you something not to sleep on. fun. I don't know when the last time you watched this was, but I've been watching Impact Wrestling
Oh, really?
lately. Yeah, and Impact now. Gallows and Anderson are signed there now, but if you ever go watch, they're on Twitch now. They have a really, really cool roster of talent, like some actually really good guys. And there's actually a guy from here in the Lexington area that's signed to Impact now. His name is Larry D, and he's it's fun to watch him on there now too. So
That's cool. I think what happens with these companies is like, okay, so like for WWE, for example, they have so much talent that like they can't use it all. You know what I mean? Like everybody
yeah,
thinks that certain people should get pushed, but like they only have so much time for
yeah,
shows. And so I think that like you're right. This is a time when Impact, maybe with a smaller roster, can take that smaller roster and push guys, and have them do stuff, and it actually be really cool. I think that's one of the things that AEW is kind of like failing in right now is they're taking they just took the revival from WWE, and they've had Matt Hardy and some different guys come over. I wish they would just kind of show us their base core roster and just kind of push them instead of trying to just constantly expand.
And there's guys like I wish like for AEW that they would push more. A guy that I really like, and I know he's a little polarizing for a lot of people that watch it, but I love Darby Allin. I think he's a guy you could really push to be like a main eventer at some point. But they kind of just give him like a little taste here, a little bit there. But he's never been like that full on push. And then there's like Jungle Boy, who you kind of see as someone that they're going to get there, or even MJF, who I don't even know how he's not like been in a world title picture yet. They're just kind of like holding off on those reserves and like, well, it's kind of time to like get to this point. You know what I mean? There's only so much Jericho I can watch. So
yeah, that's the thing with me is like, it's they're treating Jericho the same way WCW treated Hogan when they brought him over in the 90s. And Jericho is great to kind of transition at the beginning, but we're getting to a point it's like, all right, like I've seen all of Chris Jericho stuff, and now I'd kind of like to see somebody else.
yeah. Checking into our feed here, an old friend of ours is checking in, Mr. Kyle Hatfield. He says, off subject, how do you all feel about Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. 8 rounds money grab? I
Um,
think he
Go
should.
ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's because Tyson's old as hell. I mean, he's jacked as hell, but I mean, he shouldn't be fighting, unless
I
he's
mean,
really desperate for the money.
yeah, I'm in on like I've seen some of the training videos. I don't think it's good for Mike Tyson to fight.
Yeah,
I'm glad that he is fighting an older guy, Roy Jones Jr. in himself. And I'm not gonna lie to you, like, I mean, it's probably not good that they're both older guys. It's dangerous, but I mean, I'll probably watch it. So, I mean, it'll be something to watch. And what I'm afraid of though is that Tyson wins and that he kind of gets a belief in himself and tries to like come back to heavyweight, like for the current boxing stage, and then like gets destroyed.
yeah, he's 54 years old now. I mean, still looks pretty good for a 54-year-old, but yeah, I don't want to see Mike Tyson box anymore. He can do all the wrestling stuff he wants to. He wants to go to WWE, AEW, and do stuff. Go for it, man. But I will see. I remember a few years ago there was, and it wasn't by UFC or anybody. It was just some random company that did Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell as like a fight, and it was like 10 years after their prime, and it was terrible. And you get to this point where it's like, all right, I get you want that one last fight in, but it's like, come on, man.
Yeah, I watched a documentary on that, and like it was like Chuck and Tito were both talking about like you just can't ever give up fighting. You just can't ever give up fighting, and and that becomes dangerous, especially in fighting. Like there's a difference between Michael Jordan going out in his 40s with the Wizards and playing basketball, and like you're like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan's old, it's not good. But like there's a difference between that and getting hit in the head. When you're late 40s and your 50s. I feel like that there should be like a mandatory retirement age for some of those fighters, because I mean that stuff gets dangerous, man.
Kyle's chimed back in here again as well. He says, Andrew, what do you think about Nate Robertson fighting? I didn't know that he was interested in
Yeah, he
boxing.
on that Mike Tyson Roy Jones Jr. card, he's fighting like Jake Paul, I think.
This is NBA's Nate Robinson, right?
Yeah, yeah, like Nate Robb fighting. So like
Jesus.
little Nate Robinson that won the slam dunk contest. So I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that's one of those things that they're just trying to put on a show. Like they're just trying to put on a production and just like make it as crazy as possible. And it just seems to me kind of be like a money grab.
Boxing again. Well, hey, you know what? Right now,
We'll watch it.
yeah, we'll watch. We'll watch it. I'll watch just about anything. I've watched like Korean baseball in the morning on ESPN because God, I just need something to watch now.
I'm the same way. Like I told you before we started, I've watched almost every scrimmage in 3 days on NBA TV for the NBA restart. And I'm gonna tell you what, like the Wizards are so terrible that like they're hard to watch, but I miss basketball so bad that I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna watch Isaac Bonga and Mo Wagner play basketball just because I missed it so much.
Goodness, man. Well, we're happy to have it back here. And Andrew, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Man, it's been fun. I hope to have you back on here for a few other things down the road as well. I'm excited to listen to you and Daniel Orton's new podcast also, brother. So I think it's going to be a good one we got there.
I appreciate you having me on, man. You let me know when, and I would love to be back on. You know me, I got a big mouth. I'm always up to talk. Check out our podcast probably coming this weekend. It's called The Full Court Press. It's me and former NBA player Daniel Orton. You can follow me on Twitter, Andrew_W8. Andrew Williams on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Just check me out. Dan, I appreciate you for coming on. And when me and Daniel Orton get our podcast up, you're going to have to come join us.
Absolutely, man. Till next time, and thank you all for checking out the page. Follow us on Friends in the Corner podcast at FITC Podcast on social medias. Support us on Patreon. Let's get this going. The NBA is back. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed, and that is a wrap.